Travel along, Catholic pilgrims, as we learn from St. Augustine, Doctor of the Church, while we read his book, Confessions. Welcome, my fellow pilgrims. Welcome. Today we are reading from Book 1, Chapter 16. But before I read this passage, I need to fill you in so that it will make more sense. Also, if you have younger ears present, you may want to come back to this episode. It touches on some very adult topics. So, St. Augustine, in this writing today, speaks of Terence. And Terence was a 2nd century playwright, and his most famous work is what is referenced here in today's writings, Eunuchus, which means the eunuch. Now, this play was a comedy, but in reading through the plot, I was a bit disturbed by what goes on. Basically, a slave girl is going to be returned to her rightful family, but before she is taken home, a guy posing as a eunuch slips into the home that she's in and rapes her because he lusts after her. Not good. But this is why St. Augustine writes, quote, Terence brings onto the stage a desolate youth who excuses his own fornication by pointing to the example of Jupiter. He looks at a picture painted on the wall, which shows how Jupiter is said to have deceived the girl Dinah by raining a golden shower into her lap. These are the words with which he incites himself to lechery, excessive lewd sexual desire, as though he had heavenly authority for it. What a god he is! His mighty thunder rocks the sky from end to end. You may say that I am only a man, and thundering is beyond my power, but I played the rest of the part well enough, and willingly too. So the guy posing as a eunuch to get entry into the house believes he is in the right to rape the poor slave girl because Jupiter would impregnate and sleep with whoever he desired. The painting he refers to depicts the story of Jupiter turning into golden rain that falls down on an imprisoned beauty, Dinah, in order to impregnate her, and she gives birth to Perseus. So, with all that, let's read, and hopefully it will be more clear to you. And let's go ahead and open to page 36. But we are carried away by custom, by our own undoing, and it is hard to struggle against the stream. Will this torrent never dry up? How much longer will it sweep the sons of Adam down to that vast and terrible sea which cannot easily be passed, even by those who climb upon the ark of the cross? This traditional education taught me that Jupiter punishes the wicked with his thunderbolts and yet commits adultery himself. The two roles are quite incompatible. All the same, he is represented in this way, and the result is that those who follow his example in adultery can put a bold face on it by making false pretenses of thunder. But can any schoolmaster in his gown listen unperturbed to a man who challenges him on his own ground and says, Homer invented these stories and attributed human sins to the gods. He would have done better to provide men with examples of divine goodness. It would be nearer the truth to say that Homer certainly invented the tales, but peopled them with wicked human characters in the guise of gods. In this way, their wickedness would not be reckoned a crime, and all who did as they did could be shown to follow the example of the heavenly gods, not that of sinful mortals. And yet human children are pitched into this hellish torrent, together with the fees which are paid to have them taught lessons like these. Much business is at stake, too, when these matters are publicly debated, because the law decrees that teachers should be paid a salary in addition to the fees paid by their pupils. And the roar of the torrent beating upon its boulders seems to say, this is the school where men are made masters of words. This is where they learn the art of persuasion, so necessary in business and debate. As much as to say that, but for a certain passage in Terence, we should never have heard of words like shower, golden, lap, deception, sky, and the other words which occur in the same scene. Terence brings on to the stage a desolate youth who excuses his own fornication by pointing to the example of Jupiter. He looks at a picture painted on the wall which shows how Jupiter is said to have deceived the girl Dana by raining a golden shower into her lap. These are the words with which he incites himself to lechery, as though he had heavenly authority for it. What a god he is! His mighty thunder rocks the sky from end to end. You may say that I am only a man, and thundering is beyond my power, but I played the rest of the part well enough, and willingly too. The words are certainly not learnt any the more easily by reason of the filthy moral, but filth is committed with greater confidence as a result of learning the words. I have nothing against the words themselves. They are like choice and costly glasses, but they contain the wine of error which had already gone to the heads of the teachers who poured it out for us to drink. If we refused to drink, we were beaten for it, without the right to appeal to a sober judge. With your eyes upon me, my God, my memory can safely recall those days. But it is true that I learned all these things gladly, and took a sinful pleasure in them, and for this very reason I was called a promising boy. What we see here in our reading today is St. Augustine giving us insight into what the culture was teaching, especially at his schools. They were learning these types of plays. And we have this awful comedic play that has rape in it, and the rape is viewed as fine because, well, the gods of the time did this sort of thing frequently. Young men, especially, were learning that lust, lechery, fornication, even rape were fine because, heck, the gods did it and the gods were to be worshipped. St. Augustine says at the beginning of this reading that, quote, "it is hard to struggle against the stream," unquote. And this is true in our own lives. The culture nowadays tells us that living together before marriage is fine, premarital sex is fine, porn usage is normal, girls should sell themselves on OnlyFans. Any form of sexual intimacy is good. Go with your desires. And if you mention the word chastity, you get labeled a prude and a religious nut. Even St. Augustine speaks to this. He said, like, if they refused to drink what was being given them to drink, meaning these types of plays, we were beaten for it without the right to appeal to a sober judge. It's so hard to swim the opposite way of the crowd, especially when those you are supposed to look up to encourage immoral things. In St. Augustine's day, the gods were seen as mighty, but they were definitely not moral. And teachers who were to be respected were teaching these kinds of lessons, and you couldn't really say anything against them. Thankfully, we have the saints, our Blessed Mother, and Christ to look to for examples on how to live a holy and ultimately more pleasing, fulfilling, and joyful life. That is all for today, Catholic pilgrims. I'll see you soon, and until then, live the faith boldly and travel well.